Hi, welcome to this section. We're going to work with REST APIs throughout these videos. Specifically, we're going to access various APIs from Python, and then later on we're going to write our own API also with Python. So Python can both interact with APIs but also create APIs. Now, what is an API? This is what you learn in this video, and we're also going to look at an example of working with an API from Python. So specifically, we're going to work with REST APIs, which is the most common type of API that you will encounter. So what is a REST API? The boring part first. Well, API stands for Representational State Transfer Application Programming Interface. But don't get intimidated by the name, because I'll explain you what API is using an example. Everything will be clear. Now the fun part. To make you really understand what a REST API is, first let's look at a normal web page, such as this one in here. It's a space news website. So there's a server somewhere that hosts a web app, and this web app serves this website, these web pages, to users like us. So when we visit this web page, we get some results laid out in a friendly, easy to read format, nice font sizes and paragraphs. Now this is easy to read by us humans, but not by computers. So the language that has built such a readable format for humans is HTML. So at the back of this web page stands HTML language, and the browser renders that HTML. Now the problem is, if you want to read this web page, so to read the data, the content, the information, with a computer program such as a Python script, in order to get this data and do some other things with those news or other data, then in that case you could use web scraping, but web scraping is often tough. There's a lot of work involved because you have to parse all these information. And here is where REST APIs join the game. REST APIs are web applications that don't serve web pages in HTML form, but they serve them in other formats that are meant to be interpreted by applications easily. So think of an API as a way for two applications to communicate. So on one side, you have one application, for example, an application that has news, and on the other hand, you have the application that you write with Python in our case. That Python application will access the data from the news application. So let's look now at an API example. The application here, which is on the server, we don't see the application itself, but what we see is the data that this application is giving to us. So this data now is friendly for computers. It's well structured, it's in a Python dictionary-like format, and it's called JSON. So this is a JSON format, and JSON is the usual format that is served by APIs. So for humans we had HTML, and for computers we have JSON. So this particular site called newsapi.org lets us access these data in this format. Now we're accessing these news from a browser, but we can do that from Python as well. So let's jump into Python. So I'm going to open a REPL to have an empty Python file. And so through our browser we access this web page using our browser. In Python we need to access it using requests, this library. And then you create a request using requests.get. And then here you enter that URL that you have entered in your browser. You can get this URL from the lecture resources. There's a URL attached there. You can click that, it will open in your browser, then copy it and put it inside this method. And then the content will be r.json. And then if you print the content, you should get the same content that you got in here. Well, this is in the form of a dictionary. It has keys and values. So for example, the status key here has a value of OK, which is some information about the requests that we made. Then we have total results, how many news articles we have, and then we have this article's key. So now we can get that article's key by using this syntax. So since content is in the form of a dictionary, so print type content, let me comment that out. So it's a dictionary content. Therefore we can use such syntax to get the value of the articles only. So the article's key is connected to a list as value, and that list has dictionaries also. So it's nested data, but computers can understand it if you follow correct syntax in your programming language. So if we follow this, we would say we want the item with index 1, which is this dictionary. So let's continue this. Index 0, it's the first item. This one in here. And then we want perhaps the title. And run. And so we got the title of the first news article. So that's how our program is communicating with this web app, with this API. So the API app that is hosted in this server is serving data to our application, to our Python application here. So now we get those data and then we can do whatever we want with them. In this case, we got the title. You can also get the description. So you can change that to description, run. And so you have some more information there, and you can explore more keys here to access those. So the way our Python application is communicating with this API is through URLs, through URL parameters to be exact. Because if you look closely to the URL in here, you have some parameters with their values. URL parameters. For example, this is a URL parameters, it's Q in title. It means what kind of news do you want? In this case, we have stock market as the keyword for the news we want to have. So you can change that to something else. For example, United %20, which stands for a space, and then you say states. So United %20 states, run. And so you get the first news description for that query. And then you have other parameters such as from. So this is the date, 2022 to 27, you can change that to 26 and you get data for another period, if there are news for that period. And then you have sort by popularity, language in English, and each parameter, as you see, it's divided by this and symbol. And then you have the API key here. The API key is something you need to get from newsapi.org, from that website, and then you place that API key in here to make it possible to get data from this API. So that was an example of working with APIs via Python. Now, if you're interested about news, this particular news API, how to get news from this API, I'm going to elaborate on this script further in the next video. so to improve it a little bit, to make it more dynamic. Thank you for following this, and I'll talk to you in the next video.